why did you choose to use the novel form to tell the story as opposed to some other more non-fictional form?
Okay. Actually, uh, started it as a memoir. I was a student in Moscow in 1980. And when I came back, I felt like that experience changed my life. And it also brought me closer to the family history. And I know a lot of my family's here, and I'm really excited about that. Um, so I knew the skeleton of my family history. I knew that my great grandmother Zlata, and I keep her name in the book. Um, I knew that she had a very tragic life. That she was killed in a pogrom, and she was raped and murdered, actually, and somehow she was caught in a historical moment. It was a moment, and I did all this research to try and understand the historical moment that this, in a sense, she was young. Maybe she was 31 or something, or younger. What was the historical moment, this that she got caught in? And there, of course, it was actually after the Russian Revolution. There was a civil war. And she lived in the Ukraine. It was a very unstable place. And for a while, the Bolsheviks lost control of the Ukraine, and the White Army and the Ukrainian nationalists took over. It was very, very, very unstable. And then, finally, at the end of the Civil War, the Bolsheviks were able to take control of the Ukraine, take back control. Um, and the defeated armies saw Jews as Reds, and went into these little shtetls, and they just did these massacres. And my great grandmother Zlata was caught in this terrible historical moment, and that's when she lost her life. And I guess that really meant a lot. Obviously, I found out about all this as I got very close to my grandmother Sarah, who was her daughter, and tried to really understand all that she had been through, because she didn't speak all that much to me. And she, came here again, took this long journey all by herself. Her father was already here. He had actually deserted the family. But she found him, and that's a whole nother story. You have to read the book. And they were reunited outside of Boston. She was 17, and she was not wanted there. And not surprisingly, got married very shortly afterwards, had my mother when she was 17. My beloved mother is on this call, so I'm very excited about that. And so somehow this large, epic journey, and I, thought about the significance of her life. And unbelievably, 10 years later, my grandfather, who she married, he was much older than her, had radicalized here. And it was the Depression in 1931. Nobody had any jobs. It was horrible here. And he always dreamt of going back to the Soviet Union. He was a carpenter, to build the revolution, to build this equal society. So he sort of begged, borrowed, and just borrowed all the money he could find, and takes the whole family all the way back in 1931, which is really unbelievable. I realize I'm giving a very long answer here, but I just, like, the epic nature of this journey really kind of shook me as I learned more about it. And they only stayed 9 months. And, my mom was 5. My beloved Aunt Caroline was 3. I really can't imagine the whole thing. And they ended up in Leningrad in 1931. And I did a lot of research into that. And it wasn't easy. It was difficult. The conditions were harsh. And somehow they came all the way back here 9 months later. So here's this, like, epic journey. And then I go in 1980 as a young, college senior. And I knew, I decided to make it a novel because, one, it's so intergenerational, and I felt it would help me tell the story. But also, like, I really had to imagine, based on research and, everything that I could, find out about the family. But I really had to imagine that moment when my great grandmother loses her life. I had to imagine what my grandmother must have felt, because she didn't really speak very much. Um, she sang a lot of songs, and because I learned Russian, she sang me all these songs in Russian. And I think that opened up this relationship between us because I felt through the song she was telling me the story of her life, that she, it just wasn't in her personality to just sit and tell me everything that happened to her. But I kind of got it through the songs and through, other people in the family. And then I had to do this research and imagine it. And so, the novel, I spent so much time trying to figure out how to structure this enormous novel or this enormous story, like forever. And I rewrote it like, 50 million times. Um, and so somehow it seemed like the novel gave me that freedom. So that's why the novel. Thank you.
Yeah, that's interesting. That is interesting what you pointed out. This idea of communication through songs, the idea that there are things that cannot be said in a straightforward, direct way, and that's evident not just in the novel. There's constant reference to the songs that people sing, um, but there's also your own poetry about Russia, and you know in many ways it's not, it echoes the things that are actually happening in the book, but it's also providing some kind of deep, primal reaction to, you know if you think of history as being trauma, right, and these are like traumatic historical events, um you maybe the idea is that certain things just are difficult to say, and that it's easier to use art, conventional forms of sort of more abstract art like songs or poems to say, just to give like that extra depth and angle into the historic event.